Maybe just a brief introduction. I know quite a few of you already know Derek. Derek, interestingly enough, is from South Africa, and it was Drew Kennedy who said, "Ah, have you spoken to Derek about the work he's doing with CDOIQ?" And I hadn't, and I reached out to him, and at that stage they were busy planning the inaugural event in South Africa. So I don't know how many of you are actually aware of the CDOIQ that's set up by Richard Wang. Derek, I don't know if there's something you'd like to share. I know you've been involved in that for a lot more than me. Is there a brief introduction on CDOIQ that you'd like to present?
Yeah, thank you. And and thanks, Howard, and everyone in your team for making this opportunity available to me. And how's it, South Africa? Man, it's nice to just be able to say that. And uh, well, about 19 years ago, I met up with Richard Wang, a professor at MIT, and he had just come out of um, a 2-year sabbatical that he'd spent in the Department of Defense in the United States, and he was basically the chief data officer for the DoD. They didn't call it the CDO at that stage; it was early days. But as soon as he came out, he was full of enthusiasm. He said every single organization in the world needs a chief data officer, and he was looking around for a team of people to help him. And I put my hand up. There were about 5 of us initially, 19 years ago. So every year, it's something that's been running at MIT. Recently, in the last couple of years, we've spun it off as a separate entity. It's now no longer part of MIT, but our roots are 100% in the MIT culture, and we still hold the symposium just down the road from MIT this year. We were in the Hyatt Hotel. It's a mile away from MIT campus. We had about 2,200 people from all over the globe. And it was really amazing. This year, more than ever, actually, the excitement and the energy level was so high in terms of what's happening with artificial intelligence and LLMs and everyone and their mother saying that we've got to fix our data, because if we're going to do anything in the AI space, the risks are incredibly high that we're going to get sued if we don't know what's going on in our data. And so it's an exciting time. And CDOIQ is now creating these regional events across the globe. So we not only have the Big Bang in July in Boston, but we now have smaller, shorter versions that we're holding in a number of different places across the globe. So coming up in about 25 days, 26 days now, in Pretoria at Future Africa, there is a conference, a kind of a mini symposium, put it that way.
Yeah. Fantastic, Derek. And I believe you may be attending. I think there may be some questions on you getting over. So part of it was for you to share some of those ideas that you have and you'll be sharing, and some work that you do in terms of AI maturity paths and journeys. That is correct. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Fantastic. So, Derek, thank you for presenting. Thank you for joining us and sharing. You can take the screen and all yours.
Okay, brilliant. So most of you probably know that this role of a chief data officer is still pretty nascent. It's not like the CIO that's been around for a long, long time. CDO is relatively new as a role, and every year they run studies and try and work out, across various industries, what is happening with the role, how many people are stepping into that role, how successful are they, how long is their tenure, how long can they, before they have to move on for whatever reason, whether they're thrown out or whether they decide, okay, this is not for me anymore. And what's interesting is the ability for people to have, long tenure is still something that's eluding most people that are trying to step into this role. And so it's anywhere between 18 months and 2 years is typically how long people stay. Well, I was really fortunate. I stayed in TD Ameritrade for almost 5 years. And that's unusual, certainly in the United States, context. Mainly, I think the reason was because the person that I was reporting to, the chief operating officer of TD Ameritrade, was someone that I had done a ton of work for as a consultant in a number of his prior lives before he moved in as the chief operating officer at TD Ameritrade. So he knew what we could achieve together, and he did a lot of the kind of the air cover that I needed in order to get the job done. He was handling with the upper echelons of the organization and managing their expectations. So I just consider myself blessed, frankly, that I had that opportunity to work for a guy that already knew me and understood, so he was data savvy, and he was able to ensure that we could get stuff done before anyone came along and decided to end it all for whatever political reason. So that is a bit of a backdrop. I want to just take you through real quick. Gavroche is something that I started in Johannesburg about 36 years ago or so. We've had the opportunity to work with a number of amazing people over the years. Of course, people like Claudia Imhoff, Bill Inman, John Zachman, etc., etc. Had an opportunity to write one of Bill's books with him in 2008, which was DW 2.0. And over the years, we put together a thing called the 7 streams, or the Gavroche 7 streams. We call, in short, we say the G7S. And it's a playbook, but it's also a way to look at maturity of an organization. Now, there are lots of different maturity models out there. The Gavroche 7 streams maturity assessment framework that we've put together is an abstracted version. It's sort of a high-level version of the very detailed versions that you'll get out there from everyone else. And the reason why we went for something that could be abstracted was because I needed something that I could easily talk to chief executive officers of, Fortune 500 companies without them falling asleep in front of me. I needed something that was like, and I figured 7 is a nice number. People can get 7 things into their heads without falling asleep, and certainly that was the method in my madness, and more about that a little bit later on. So the book DW 2.0 we translated into a couple of different languages. You see that on the left-hand side. But in essence, as we were busy writing it, we were saying to ourselves, what has been going on in the data world over all these years that we've been involved? We've had these waves of technology, and every time a wave comes in, everyone gets excited and runs around, and you know, it becomes hectic. You know, everyone's just buying stuff, and the vendors of the stuff that they're buying are saying, well, this is all you need. You know, this is the panacea. This is the silver bullet. You don't need anything else. This is going to solve all your data problems. And you know, we've seen that that's just not true. So I feel like there've been 4 waves. Metadata repository was probably the first one. IBM was even big on that. They were saying that they were coming up with this metadata repository was going to take over the world. And yeah, that just kind of fizzled out. And other vendors stepped into that space. But then there was data warehousing. And you know, one of the things that Bill Inman realized only much later in his career was that he should have patented the term data warehousing and given it a clear definition, because he didn't do that, and because of that, everyone jumped in and thought, that's a nice name, that data warehouse. It's got a nice ring to it. Let's use it and call our product a data warehouse as well. And of course, a lot of products suddenly appeared on the scene being called data warehouses, which were not anywhere near what Bill had intended when he first invented the idea of a data warehouse. So because of that, there was, you know, a lot of people buying stuff that they thought was a data warehouse, and then it was failing. And then they were saying, well, data warehouse didn't work. What's the next thing? And the next thing that came riding in on the next wave was the big data lake. You know, everyone was talking data lake, data lake, data lake. And of course, a lot of those were failing and have continued to. But some, you know, some metadata repositories worked, some data warehouses worked, some data lakes have worked. But the vast majority have been a bit lackluster. And then, of course, now we're into artificial intelligence, machine learning, LLMs. Everyone's just talking. And once again, people are listening to the wrong story and getting the wrong idea and saying, oh, we don't need any of these other things. We don't need a repository. We don't need a warehouse. We don't need a lake. We just need artificial intelligence and gobs of data. Well, what we would like to suggest is that we need to get it right this time. You know, rather than rushing after every single, you know, new little thing that pops up, no matter how promising it looks, we need to keep the big picture in mind. And that is that you can't just look at AI. It's got to be data and AI. I think we're even starting to see now some of the really thinking organizations are starting to say, we don't have chief data officers anymore. We don't have chief data and analytics officers anymore. We have chief officers in charge of data and analytics. So chief data and artificial intelligence officers. So data and AI is coming into the title of this chief role in a number of organizations that are really thinking this one through. So what I want to share with you, given that as a bit of a backdrop, is some of the things that we were doing at TD Ameritrade. Of course, the DW 2.0 book came out in 2008, so that was the sort of the foundation on which I stepped into the role at TD Ameritrade. But at the same time as I was doing that, the whole IBM push on Watson and you know, the beginnings of this big wave of artificial intelligence that we are now in was just starting up. And of course, TD Ameritrade was an IBM customer. We had a big Netezza implementation for our data warehouse, and we were looking at what do we need to do next, and of course they were pushing Watson, and so we had a number of POCs and pilots and stuff running in our innovation center, trying to figure out, how could we use this new technology? Where would it be most effective in our business? So so a lot of this was kind of coming together at the same time. We needed to come up with a strategy, and of course, EDAG it stands for Enterprise Data and Analytics Group. The Enterprise Data and Analytics Group is the name of the organizational unit that I created. I was the first chief data officer at TD Ameritrade. They hadn't had anyone with responsibility for data before. So I literally had to start from zero to build a team, create a strategy, and I'll share that with you as it went. And I'll share then also how the role developed. What we knew we needed to do was to build a capability, but we wanted to be sure that we were doing it for the right reasons. So we were looking at what's the business reason. Why does TD Ameritrade want to look at data and analytics, and why does it want it now? That's a key question that I'm sure all of us have become very sensitive to over the years. If you've been involved in data for any length of time, you'll resonate with that, and because it's so easy to jump into building a data capability, and it becomes a little science project all on its own. And after a while, the business is asking, "What are you guys doing there? Why do you exist?" I think we need to disband your organizational unit and get rid of you because you're just a big waste of time and money. So making sure that...
Derek.
Yes.
Sorry, Derek. Maybe just to ask you a question. One of the things I found in my experience is a lot of the times the people clutch onto those silver bullets because of the lack of a strategy, or the lack of a strategy that talks to their requirements and needs. And I certainly see it calming down when the strategy is in place, they're seeing us delivering, and the data people are starting to interpret what that technology can do for them, and how it can be applied, rather than them desperately trying to clutch on that something is not working in their own data area. Is that your experience as well?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But the starting point for the data, for the strategy, I guess the main point that I've seen over and over again is to make sure that it's lodged in the business strategy. So in other words, why is the business, what's the main business driver? And then
the alignment,
strategy comes
alignment to the goals and objectives.
Yes. Yes. And then the fourth bullet point is sustaining that business value. It's so easy to grab a technology of some type or another, implement something, and then declare victory, and then walk away from it. And then, 6 months later, you turn back and look at it, and it's gone. It's disappeared. No one's using it. It hasn't been adopted, and everyone's saying, "Well, that was a waste of time and money." So how do we make sure that the business value is sustained, and we can build on it, and it can scale up from there? That's another very important factor that we tried to make sure that we covered off on in TD Ameritrade. I'll talk briefly about the playbook, the G7S playbook, and how we used that. The architecture, absolutely critical. The managing organizational change, changing the culture, because in essence, every time you're coming in with a data-driven approach to an organization, you are, in essence, changing the culture. And that's, culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. So you've got to make sure that you're doing a deliberate thing with organizational change. And then measuring success. So let's jump in. And by the way, just as Howard did there, anyone feel free to jump in with questions as we go. I'm quite relaxed. Let's make it. This is your session, not mine. So, okay, here we go. Strategy. The main thing, of course, with any strategy is you've got to have short-term wins, but you've got to have your eye on the long term. At TD Ameritrade, the first day that I'm there, I walk into the CEO's office, and on the first day, I've got my tie on and I've got a suit on. And he says, okay, take the jacket off, take your tie off. He's sitting there in his golf shirt, and he's like, you're not going to need those anymore. I said, well, I just wanted to wear it on the first day, to make a good impression. And he said, yeah, okay, you've done that. I want to tell you, Derek, what you're going to do for me. You have to make us, as a company, become more Amazon-like. So I look at him and I say, okay, I think I know what you mean, but let's talk a little bit more. He says, well, I'm glad you say you think you know, because most of the people who report to me are saying, I don't know what you're talking about when you say we've got to become more Amazon-like. And I said, well, I think it's something about, when I get onto Amazon tells me, hey, Derek, nice to see you again. Last time you bought this, maybe you want to look at some of these other products because other customers like you have bought these other products as well. And inevitably, I look at them and inevitably I buy one or two of them in addition to what I wanted to get onto Amazon to buy in the first place. And I don't feel like they're being creepy. I don't feel like they know too much about me. I value the fact that they know me as a customer and they present useful things to me to think about purchasing. I don't, I feel like they've figured out how to, walk that fine line between knowing too much and making me feel that they're creepy and they're following me, and knowing too little about me as a customer. They've got it right on the nose. And so I said, okay, well, in order to do that, we need to make sure that we are customer-centric. And one of the things I know is that we've grown by acquisition and we haven't done any integration of our databases. So we're not customer-centric, we're account-centric. And we've got just tons of accounts. And I, as a customer of yours, might have 10 accounts, but you don't know that I've got 10 accounts. You just know there's an account here with, oh, look, it's Derek. And there's another account there. Oh, look, it's Derek again. But there's no way of pulling me all together and saying, okay, Derek has 10 accounts with us. And that's something we're going to have to work on urgently. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. Because what we want to do is to have personalized offerings. We want to have a decision rule engine. We want to have propensity modeling, event recognition. We want to do, account and activity aggregation. We want a household, even beyond just knowing that Derek has 10 accounts. We want to know, has his wife got accounts? Has his daughter got accounts? We want the full householding picture. So, we were aligned very quickly on that. And he said, listen, I don't want you to go around the organization begging for money from other people's budgets. I'm going to give you a big fat pot of gold from me to you to get this done, because this is critical. We've got to do this as an organization. So tell me what you need. I'll give it to you. And I was like, wow, this is going to be cool. And it was. And he stuck to his guns and he was phenomenal. So we were trying to build, a war cry for ourselves as a team. And, in essence, we were looking at everyone in the organization, and they were looking at the databases that they were using and getting frustrated about. And they were saying, well, it just takes so long to do things. It's so difficult to get into it. And of course, all of this was exacerbated by the fact that, everyone in this modern day and age uses Google to find things. And Google is really fast. And many people are using the Apple uh, uh, platforms and tools, and those are intuitive and very easy to use mostly. And a lot of people are using Amazon, so people are used to being served fast, easy, and intimate. So we said, okay, we're going to make our data fast, easy, and intimate, and we're going to make sure that it's accurate, accessible, and actionable. So those are the 3 A's that we said. We're going to go out into the organization saying, that's what we're going to achieve together. And of course, we had to do a lot of improvement on the analytics side of things. We didn't have good analytics tools in place, or even an understanding of techniques. There were a lot of people who wanted to be data scientists and just didn't have the wherewithal to do it, or the support from their management. So we knew that there was a lot of work that we'd have to do to get our data into shape to be able to support a customer-centric enterprise. So I spoke mainly to the chief operating officer and the chief marketing officer initially to try and get them to figure out together with me how we were going to do this. We had a data team, but it was buried down the bottom of a development organization, and they were just burnt out. The demand was through the roof, but the data architecture was horrible in most of our systems. We had a Netezza system, which was actually fairly good and had achieved some good success, but the rest of the organization was a total shambles. And so what we did was we focused on how we were going to create a customer-centric enterprise. And we had a goal by the second year of achieving a large number in terms of net new assets for the company, and improved offer targeting and timing and personalized services. So those were the things that we were going after. So we narrowed it down. Of course, there were a number of other business initiatives that were going on as well, which were in flight, and we needed to be able to support in some way or another. But we were really trying to find some area that we could focus on that could perhaps help a number of those other in-flight initiatives as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we did that shortly. But in essence, this is what we were trying to do: come up with a master data management solution where we could have various households with clients in them, but these clients could have accounts across households. So, we could have a client here and a client here, which were joint holders of an account, even though they were in different households. And this was impossible to do in our current world. We didn't even have a way of taking, 2 accounts and linking them up to a client, let alone finding a household, let alone having cross-household accounts. So we had our work cut out for us. But that was the vision of where we wanted to get to. Now, keep that in the back of your mind. Now, as we started putting together the role, what was my organization going to look like? When I started, there was just me. Yeah, I was the first chief data officer, and they were saying, okay, well, who are you going to collaborate with? Who do you need in your organization? Are we going to have solid lines and dotted lines of reporting all over the place here. What's it going to look like, Derek? And I said, look, if you want me to do what you have said in terms of making us into an Amazon-like organization and fixing this problem with customer MDM, master data management, I'm going to need a bunch of people directly under my control. I can't be reliant on external teams outside of my remit. So we set about looking at what are the main things that we're going to need. Before we did that, just to recap, I was reporting to this chief operating officer, who in turn reported to the CEO, but I had a kind of a dotted line to the CEO, because what he did was he said, I'm going to make, every year he published his own objectives, and those objectives that he had to report back on a regular basis to the board on how he was doing. He said, I'm going to take some of your objectives, Derek, and I'm going to make them my objectives. That's how much I'm committed to doing this. So I had a dotted line reporting to him as well, because I was, trying to help him to make sure that he was able to look good at the board meetings. Now, reporting also to the chief operating officer was a CIO, a CTO, and a whole lot of other shared service type people, like the back office, the mid office, the procurement people, et cetera, et cetera. So there were a lot of other folks reporting into COO, and the technology guys were there. So I was seen not as a technology player, but as a business person. The chief data officer was a business person, and that's how we set it up, and that's how we continued to make our presence known. But we needed to have technology teams reporting directly to the chief operating officer, to the chief data officer's organization. And so on the right-hand side, you'll see two pillars there: data architecture and administration, and data resource development center. Those are the technology pieces of the puzzle. On the left-hand side, the two pillars are data governance and demand management and analytics. Those were the business pieces. So the CDO was a business role, but it had two technology pillars and two business pillars that were inside the CDO organization. And we'll talk a bit more about them now. The data governance and demand management was set up on a kind of a center of excellence approach. So we had a small team of data governance experts, about 10 of them, and they were responsible for all the different tools that we would be using, and for coaching the data owners and the data stewards in how to use those tools and what they should be doing, what their jobs would entail. And we had people in all the different parts of the organization who were the data stewards. They were still reporting directly up into the business. They had kind of a dotted line reporting into me. So this was a center of excellence kind of a structure for the first pillar being the data governance pillar. The second pillar, also a business pillar, also was arranged in a center of excellence approach. So we had a center of excellence for business intelligence, which I had taken over, and we turned it into a center of excellence for not only BI, but also this is where we started creating the innovation center and started doing things with Watson to try and experiment and see how we could use Watson in our business processes. But once again, we had teams out in the business who had solid line reporting up to their head of the business unit, but dotted line reporting in to me. And as we move into the third pillar, data architecture, data administration, these were people that came directly into my organization. So this was not a center of excellence situation. This was centralized. And likewise, the Data Resource Development Center, the data warehouse team was the start of this. This became a centralized team in my organization. So it moved out of the CIO and the CTO's domain into my organization.
Sorry, Derek.
Yes.
Sorry, question. Now, today we have so many enterprise architecture groups that typically where the data architect resides, and there's quite often quite a lot of friction or challenges between those two. Is what you're suggesting now, what you're presenting now, is that and a really important thing to bring under, because you have mentioned architecture quite a few times, is that quite a critical part to have under your direct remit, or is it something that you can work on, but you'd have to pay more attention?
I think that, in my experience, the chief data officers that have architecture and governance, those two key things, architecture and governance, directly under their control, are the ones who are able to really make strides and move quickly to start delivering solutions for the organization and changing the culture. I've found that when the architecture group is outside of the CDO's world, it's very difficult because you've got to spend an awful lot of time trying to get people on board. Right. Can it be done? Yeah, it can be done. It depends on how collaborative the organization's culture is. Right. But I think human nature is such that, it's always going to be a little bit more difficult if those people are outside of the organization.
Right. I know Drew's got a question as well.
Question for you. When you say architecture, is that all architecture or is it data architecture?
It's mainly data architecture. There are cases where we've seen enterprise architecture would also be useful, and some type of platform architecture as well. But the main thing is data architecture.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, for me, that's where you should be supporting your data strategy, which should be supporting your business strategy. The other architects very often are solution architects, application architects, and are focused on silos.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely.
But Drew, won't you have a challenge there, because technology with respect to AI and aspects like that, they're also becoming part of it. So, there is that digital transformation,
but you can stretch the boundaries a bit if you're the chief data officer.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Anyway,
make sure that you've got the go.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say you make sure you've got R&D under your portfolio as well, so you can exploit different technologies that allude to or support analytics and data.
Yeah, that's right. The innovation lab, was really critical for us. And the great thing about our chief operating officer was he really had a mindset of creating a learning organization. And he wanted, one of his big things is always, fail fast. and test and learn. So it was great having that kind of culture being introduced to TD Ameritrade at the same time as I was trying to get data off the ground. So yeah, I mean, in terms of one of the key things I always try to use is this. There was an article in 2012, October 2012, which is the 2012 was when I was starting off this whole initiative at TD Ameritrade, and in the Harvard Business Review there was a thing called the big data, the management revolution. And Andrew McAfee was talking about hippos. He said the biggest barrier to getting stuff done going forward is always going to be the hippos, which is the highest paid person's opinion in the leadership of the organization. And basically what we're coming in with is a countercultural view that don't give me your opinion, show me the data. And so we've got to be superheroes, basically. At a very high level, what we were trying to do was to, hit a number of things. Although our focus was very specifically on making us more Amazon-like and getting, in the short term, really focusing on master data management around our clients, we wanted to also show how that was going to affect operational data management, our competitive ability, our ability to control risk, and our ability to adapt. So these four goals were things that we wanted to constantly come back to and show how doing what we were doing was going to have a ripple effect on a number of other areas where people were already experiencing pain. And so we were looking at why is this important to us right now, and we're looking at the various key initiatives that people were spinning up and showing how those things, even down in the risk area, like the anti-money laundering initiatives that were going on and the know your customer stuff, how that was going to benefit from the work that we were doing. We also wanted to look at emerging trends, in terms of, mobile phones. Everyone wanted to have apps for the various applications that we used to always have just online, and people would have to go and get in front of their laptops. Now we were saying, no, you've got to be able to do trades, whilst you're taking a walk down the road with your dog, and you've got your mobile phone to do a trade. All of those things were happening at the same time as I was joining. So it was an exciting time from that perspective. You had all these different emerging trends to deal with. So we tried to kind of bring it together in a framework that we could easily communicate back to the board and back to the senior leaders of the organization. And so those four goals that I alluded to a little bit earlier, the operational data management, the competitive analytic advantage, the risk, the managing our risks better, and enabling us to change at the speed of business, became the four components through which we were viewing the work that we were doing. And of course, we wanted to also show how this was going to change the organization. So we wanted to look at the business processes and show which business processes were going to change. And we knew customer relationships and experience was going to be the key area. And within that, the strategy for relationship management, excuse me, and within that, again, the very first piece of the puzzle was segmentation analysis and planning. That was the first piece of the puzzle from a business capability perspective that was going to benefit from the work that we were doing. We wanted to show that you know, to manage people's expectations in terms of the very first set of, releases of this, that the area that was going to benefit from it the most was going to be segmentation analysis. And that's the area that the business had said to us was going to be the most valuable to them. We told them that, there are going to be a lot of pieces of data that we're going to have to analyze and look at. It's going to stretch across the marketing data and all the data that you would typically find in your party subject area. So clients certainly would be a key one, but there would be a number of other parties that we would need to look at as well. And so those, of course, mapped to the client relationship and experience. So client became the key data subject area, obviously, that we were going to focus on. So we needed an owner for client, and we needed to find that owner very quickly so that we could figure out who are the data stewards, and if we needed to have data officers as well. And I'll talk a little bit about that shortly. But in order to support the implementation of this whole data strategy that we were starting to cobble together, we knew that we needed to create data and analytics capabilities. So we needed teams, we needed processes, we needed job descriptions, we needed the whole story. If we were going to be able to provide these kinds of data services and analytics services on the front end of the work that we would do in my organization, we would need a whole lot of things at the back end. We'd need awareness management, we'd need governance and oversight, we'd need platform engineering, data architecture, product and service management. We'd need the data teams, the hardcore data teams and the hardcore analytics teams, and all the processes and policies and standards that would need to be put in place for all of that to function. So, we wanted to keep the big picture in mind whilst we focused on the master data as the first piece of the puzzle and some of the advanced analytics that we wanted to put in place around our customer master. We wanted to make sure that we were going to sustain it as well. So, yes, we had some short-term wins, but we wanted to make sure that the long-term was in place. And this is where the architecture thing comes in so strong, is if you don't have the longer-term vision and the longer-term business value and the ability to scale up in the forefront of your mind, and you just focused on short-term wins, then you don't create the infrastructure and the ability to scale. And therefore, you end up with short-lived successes. So, making sure that you've got a long-term architecture, a robust architecture in place was absolutely key right out of the gate for us. Now, we were focused on data architecture. We were focused on making the data accessible, accurate, and actionable. We knew governance was key. We didn't have any governance at all. If you wander down the corridor and say, whose responsibility is data quality? People would say, they'd shrug their shoulders, basically. And most people were in denial. They'd say, yeah, our data's okay. We don't need anyone to look at our data quality or improve it. And I was like, okay, we'll see. I'm going to run some data profiling and I'll show you. And so I did that. And very quickly, everyone got alarmed and realized that someone actually did need to look at the data quality of the organization, because we had crazy stuff like, for example, just ripping through a bunch of our databases, looking at name and address information on our clients. and looking at, if you take an address and you break it down into street address and city and state and blah, blah, blah. Just looking at the state code, or the state description, I found that we had, and at that stage, TD Ameritrade was focused only on America, that we didn't have a big presence elsewhere. We'd been experimenting in Singapore and some of the Far East, but we didn't have a major presence over there. So my expectation when I did the profiling was I was going to find, probably 50 odd, instances of state, because we were America, right? And so we found 128. And I was looking through what are the values of it, and I was seeing things like Singapore in the state code. Okay, we've got a problem. And so even some of those crazy basic things where you've got fields that have been overloaded, they're used for things that they were never intended for. Those made people take notice, and they realized that we do need a really strong data governance approach. Now, the question was how were we going to find the owners for this data? And we wanted to get really granular. We weren't talking at the data subject area now. As we got into this situation with client, we realized there was a lot of data elements that people were considering part of client that really weren't really part of marketing. There were things that really should be owned by someone else somewhere in the organization. And so we said, let's break it down into critical data elements. Let's look for what are the top 5 critical data elements, and literally just 5 of them within the realm of the customer subject area. And let's try and figure out who owns them. Well, we spent a half a day with the senior leadership team of the organization trying to work out, just at the very first step, the data subjects. Which data subjects should live in which areas of the business, which should be owned by which areas of the business. So we had that, but now we were down at the element level, the data elements, the critical data element level. And we said, okay, is this, even though we've got this guideline of where the subjects are owned, is this data element owned in that framework, in the right place? And so we would recommend an owner, and then there would be a bunch of discussion about that. And sometimes the owner would say, no, well, that's not mine. And we'd kick it back again and have further discussions. And eventually we'd get an owner and governance could begin. But what did it look like for client? So the client subject area was ultimately not owned by marketing. We said the subject area should be owned by the back office, the middle office and the back office, because they're the people that had the most comprehensive picture of client data. There should be some of the client data that would be owned by the marketing people. That would be the prospects and the leads. They would own that aspect of client. The retail business unit would own retail customers. The institutional part of the business would own the institutional customers. There were certain attributes that the compliance team would own. And so the picture became one where you had an overall owner for the subject area, but when you got down to the attributes, there were other people that were involved in ownership. So what that led to was you had this matrix of owners, and you had an overall governor, that being the person in charge of the middle office and the back office. That was the governor for the ownership group around client. Now, in some cases, things aren't as complicated as this. In some subject areas, it's more cut and dried, and there's one and only one. And that's wonderful when you get that situation. But client, when you've got multiple lines of business stretched across your organization, is seldom in a situation where it can be owned by one and only one part of the organization. So we had our subject area model that we'd come up with, and we had owners for each of the subject areas. And with client being in the middle here, client was the one that we've just looked at. And so, we had primary owner, or the governor, was the back office, middle office, back office. And then you had secondary owners being the others that I mentioned. And then we had for the account, we again had a primary owner and secondary owners, and likewise for all the different subject areas. This is just for illustrative purposes. I've got these two slides in. All right, now we start looking at the 7 Streams playbook. So the 7 Streams, and I'm going to run through this really quickly. What we did with the 7 Streams was we wanted to be able to communicate with people in the C-suite about what we were doing. And we've said that there are basically 7 things. If you think about the chief data officer sitting in the control room of the Starship Enterprise, he needs to have 7 levers in front of him, 7 dials and 7 things that he can turn. And he's got to have his eye on 7 things, basically. Data governance, data architecture being obviously the absolutely key, both of those two being absolutely critical. Then you've got the development of data assets, you've got the data quality, you've got data context, which is the metadata. You've got your analytics, data science, and artificial intelligence, and all those types of things. And then you've got infrastructure, the platforms, the interoperability of the platforms. And basically the way that I've always used this when I talk to C-suite folks is that I need budget to be able to improve our capabilities in these 7 areas. And I need to keep them in step with each other. I can't just put all my effort into governance and architecture and forget about data quality and data context and analytics and infrastructure. I can't do that because I need those other pieces of the puzzle to walk in step with me as I improve everyone's maturity levels simultaneously. I've got to keep an eye on all 7 of these things. And that has been something that has resonated with people. They've understood that I've got to have people, process, data, and technology maturity in all 7 of those areas in order for me to win, in order for me to make the successes that we want to make in the organization. Of course, it maps quite nicely to the wheel. Data governance being in the sector, in the center of it, data architecture up to the top left. And then all those other ones, we have mapped the wheel to the 7 streams, and it maps very nicely. The next couple of slides I'm going to really jump through fast, but data governance is all about appointing owners, officers, and stewards. Data architecture is coming up with a blueprint. Data asset development is introducing an agile approach. Data quality has a whole life cycle of its own. finding the problems, fixing the problems, monitoring the problems, creating data quality dashboards. The context, active metadata, and analytics, creating a cognitive journey for the organization, and infrastructure, integrating the various platforms, so the data can be managed across the platforms. There's a maturity model at the back of this, and when I started TD Ameritrade, this is the level of maturity that we had. We were level 0 for just about everything, except for data asset development, because we had a really nice little Netezza data warehouse, which gave us a level 1. But we needed to get to a target state of mainly level 3, sometimes a level 2. And that's what gave us the start of putting together our strategy. So we had our data strategy contained 7 components that related to the 7 streams, based on where we were and where we needed to get to. How would we do that? The playbook sits behind all of this, and the playbook basically has, for each of these cells in the playbook, there are multiple line items, and each line item is a play card. So the play card tells you what's the objective of the play, what's the description, what's the RACI chart, like who's involved, who's responsible, accountable, and consulted, any templates that are available, the dependencies for inputs and outputs. These are basically play cards that can be used to kickstart the work inside of any one of these. So if you're planning your data governance, the first line item is identify and manage the enterprise data demand, which is this play card over here. And okay, who needs to be involved? Well, here's a list of people that need to be involved. And what are they going to do? This is what they're going to do. So we used the G7S framework with its playbook and its maturity model and its basically communication structure to talk to and influence the organization and help direct people in the right direction. Architecture, absolutely key. People were starting to run around and saying, well, all we need to do is build a data lake. A lot of vendors were knocking on my door. Derek, you need a data lake. Yeah, you've got a data warehouse, but now you need this lake. And I'm thinking, how am I going to sell a lake to the C-suite? I can talk to them about a thing like a warehouse, because people understand what a warehouse is, but you walk into their office and you say, Mr. CEO, I want to build a lake. And he's like, wow, okay. So you build a dam wall, and the water dams up against it. And then what, Derek? How do you structure it? What's in it? How do you know what's in it? I don't get it. And I thought, yeah, I don't get it either. Like, we're going to have to come up with a different way of describing this. So I thought for a while, and I actually contacted Bill Inman, and I said, I don't like this term data lake. It sucks. I can't use it to communicate to people. It doesn't make any sense. And he said, yeah, I know it doesn't. I don't know anything else yet. So I went off and I looked at, a warehouse, and what's upstream from a warehouse is if you look at the railways and people bringing goods to a warehouse, ultimately, they come through a marshalling yard. Anyone who's ever traveled on the passenger trains in South Africa, there's a place called De Aar. And that's like one of the biggest marshalling yards on the face of the earth. And, I thought, well, why don't we call it a marshalling yard? Because we're bringing data from all over the place. It's almost like a staging area, actually, but it's a little bit more than a staging area because we're going to do some analytics on it. And in a marshalling yard, you can look at the bill of lading on the various trucks of the train that come in, and you can, have different sidings within the marshalling yard where you put stuff and you wait for other trucks to come in, and then you shunt them together, and eventually they might leave there to go somewhere else. But you're marshalling your data. So I called Bill and he said, yeah, that sounds pretty good. Why don't you go ahead and call it that? So that's what I did. So we decided we were going to put together a marshalling yard. We still wanted to keep our data warehouse, contrary to everyone in the industry at that stage who said, you don't need a data warehouse anymore, you just need a data lake. We're saying rubbish, because your data warehouse is in place because you've got farmers who are acting on behalf of tourists, and you've got operators who are working on the up-to-the-minute stuff in operational data stores. You've got your tourists who are the senior executives who are wanting to know why the traffic lights on their dashboard are going amber or red, and they want someone to go and investigate. So those three sort of archetypes of user, the farmers, the operators, and the tourists, they require databases that are in ACID format. They've got to be, atomic. They've got to be, the data quality has to be right. It can't be just tossing a bunch of data into a lake, or into any repository. So we said you've got to keep the data warehouse going for those folks. But when it comes to the explorers and the miners, those guys, archetype 4 and 5, basically, are the types that they would really benefit from a different kind of environment, because the warehouse doesn't suit what they need to do. And so we made distinction again, reminded people of the fact that, you've got these 5 archetypes and they need different environments. In the old days, before big data and before data lakes and stuff, we talked about creating separate exploration warehouses and separate data mining warehouses, because we realized that the data warehouse itself was not going to be the right place for them to work. But now we could go ahead and start developing a separate area. We would keep the warehouse and the physical operational data store because of the reasons I've just mentioned. It's got to be ACID compliant. We still needed to look at data quality. Again, some of the voices coming out of the big data stable was, you don't have to worry about data quality anymore. Well, guess what? We do. Especially now with artificial intelligence and the risks involved in using lousy data to try and do your AI. It just doesn't make sense to do it. So what we were rapidly starting to develop was this idea that, yes, you've got your structured data with your ETL into your data warehouse and various queries being run against that, but you also would have this data marshalling yard out here with where you could do sophisticated queries and simple queries against the raw data or the disambiguated data. And then you may need to do some textual ETL to bring that data into your data warehouse, where you would now have semi-structured data joining your structured components. So, our architecture was starting to, call out the need for textual ETL. And of course, that's one of the big things that Bill Inman has been working on for quite some time now. It's just an example of some of the textual ETL work. But the idea being that you want to be able to bring your semi-structured data into your structured world in the data warehouse, where you can look at the two together. So this is an example from Mayo Clinic, and it's, of course, blurred out on purpose because it is, for privacy and so on issues. But this was the picture that we were showing our the people that needed to agree to us spending money on textual ETL. There weren't any examples at that stage of financial, so this was the best I could use to convey the information to our purchasing department and the people that were making decisions. But in essence, what we went for was, a series of DW 2.0 components, and we were very careful to talk about archival, because we had a large data warehouse and it was going to get much larger as we started looking at big data. Our data footprint was going to get bigger, and we started emphasizing the need to really create an archival sector. We started experimenting on the first thing that appeared to be the most mature at the time, which was Hadoop. We invested in a Hadoop platform, and we started using data science within that platform to start proving the value of the data that we were putting into it. So yeah, my perspective was, forget about the term data lake. Let's use a data marshalling yard as the metaphor. And the notion that data warehousing and data quality improvement was obsolete was total nonsense, and I sort of proved that. The capabilities that we had to put in place were basically, foundational capabilities. We had the EDW, the Enterprise Data Warehouse. We did not have a client master data. We did not have virtualization capabilities. We did not have a Hadoop environment. We didn't have glossaries or data lineage. So all of this, essentially everything here except for EDW and the teaser, was missing. We had to put that all in place. And we had to work on our data quality down this axis here. We had to get accurate, accessible, actionable data in place. And so I used this diagram just to show people that, yes, we were working on some short-term wins, but we were also working on a bunch of long-term foundational things that were going to carry us into the future and make sustainable our short-term wins. Now, to manage the organizational change, we realized that we were, right from day one, we were going to be up against opposition. In the business community, people were going to be saying, why do I need to govern my data? That should be something that you should do in the technology group. There was also resistance because they had their own analytics teams, and they didn't want anyone creating a central center of excellence that they would have to have a dotted line reporting to. So those two things were issues that I had to work on really hard to bring them around to understanding that this is something we're going to need to work on as a team, and there are benefits for them. In the technology community, we were still using waterfall, approach to development. No one was using agile, so we had to convert the organization into an agile mindset, which was a mammoth task. People were against cloud computing, believe it or not. Back in 2012, everyone was scared of cloud computing in the financial industry in the US. We had to, that was another major issue that we had to persuade people and prove to them that it's actually a lot safer very often in the cloud than it is on an on-premise, data center. The data security needs and the need to access data needed to be balanced out, because we had our analytics teams desperately wanting to get hold of data, and we had our chief information security officer and his team who'd locked down the data so effectively that no one could get it at the data. So there were a bunch of things that we needed to do there. 2 books that we found really, really useful. I'm sure some of you would have come across these. The one was John Cotter, Leading Change. He has an 8-step process. We followed his process. If you haven't read it, read it. It's phenomenal. And
Derek,
the second one,
it's in the DM box. So they've actually, in the latest one, they refer to his stages of change.
Ah, fantastic. And then the second one is Lencioni, The Advantage. This book is so good when you are creating a new organization and trying to figure out how to introduce it to the rest of the organization to understand, so they can understand the rules of engagement and what you can do for them. This book is phenomenal. Again, we followed it to the T. Like just getting clarity. Why do we exist? How do we behave? What do we do? How will we succeed? Great way of, getting your team organized and then taking it on a roadshow so the rest of the organization can understand what you can do for them. Now, measuring success. We're into the last couple of slides here. There's a lot of people go about, okay, what was your ROI? What was your return on investment? I think ROI is like the worst measure of success that there possibly can be. I avoid it like the plague. These next couple of slides, hopefully I'll be able to convey why. But in essence, the real measure of success is, what can I do today that I couldn't do yesterday in the business? What are the things I can do that I can't do, that I wasn't able to do before? That's really success. And, what is the business value related to that specifically? How easily can I make changes, the change-enabled enterprise? How many of my technology pain points have I gotten rid of? It used to be such a pain to do such and such. Now I can do it so easily. Those are the kinds of, almost intangible things that you want to start with when you're measuring success. And then you can get a bit more detail if you want to take it down to tangible, money, level. But essentially, this is how we did it at TD Ameritrade. What can we do now that we couldn't do 6 months ago? What will we be able to do in 6 months' time that we cannot do today? And in 12 months' time, what will we be able to do that we can't do today? And those are the things that we used. We had a whole bunch of short-term wins. We implemented a codes master data. We implemented data virtualization. We implemented the initial set of components in the data marshalling yard, so we could do textual analytics on emails, chats, and sales notes. And then we had a bunch of longer term things that we were going to focus on that could build on these. We could get down to, specific scores as well, but, this is not where we started. We didn't start with trying to put, dollars and cents onto these scores. We ended up with a very small set that we were going to monitor. And of course, then we also entered for the International Society of Chief Data Officers Award in 2020. And we got it. And I had a great team of people working for me, many of whom I still am very closely involved with. And in fact, 3 of them have actually worked for Gavroche. Jeff Gentry, Eric Lydek, and Hamid Ben Brahim all have worked in the Gavroche network as well since then. Actually, Krishna as well, come to think of it. Krishna also did some work for me through Gavroche after he left TD Ameritrade. So anyway, great team. We implemented a data marshalling yard, the DMY, very successfully, and we went beyond the book, the DW 2.0 book, because we created the marshalling yard, and we were very successful with that. So we are right on 31 minutes past on my watch. So I think we've done our allotted time.
Thanks, Derek. Thank you very much. So any of those, are there any questions? If you could raise your hand, and then I'll just try to manage them at a time, or if you'd like to, there we see Drew. Quick, Drew. Okay, go for it.
Derek, how did you manage to upskill all of those people across all those different bits and pieces? Because it sounded like you went through a massive amount of change, and if the States is anything like here, there's a dire shortage of good skills.
Yeah. Fortunately, we had quite a few good people in the business teams already. They were just frustrated because they didn't have the tools in place to be able to do what they wanted to do. So we were able to, we had a good sort of reservoir of people, with some fairly good skills that we could use. But in addition to the business folks, we went out, that guy that I pointed out a bit earlier, Hamid Ben Brahim, he's got a PhD. He's very well connected to just about every research unit in every large university across the globe. And he was able to bring together about a dozen university labs in a kind of a Shark Tank arrangement that we basically gave them a bunch of our data. We had to, anonymize the data, and we put it out into an AWS space, and we gave these 12 labs access to it, and we said, go crazy. Come back and tell us what you see and tell us what you think we should be doing, and just open the doors. So we were able to use their resources, their PhD students, their master's students, and their technology to very quickly start getting a feel for what was going on in our data. And then we down selected to 3 universities after we did the Shark Tank thing. And then we formed joint teams with their people and our business teams and our center of excellence to be able to take matters forward. So that was in the analytics side, in answer to your question, Drew. But on the other side of the coin, yeah, that took time for us to, it took us about 3 years to actually build up the muscle that we needed in the technology teams, in architecture and in the data development, data ops teams.
Thanks. Derek, I said that Bill had his hand up. I know that after this die. So Bill, I'm just checking, did we answer your question?
Sorry, Howard, it was put out by mistake.
No problem. No problem. Di, your question? Sorry, Di, we can't hear you. Let's go to Rizwani before, and then maybe hopefully Di gets her sound sorted out. Rizwani?
Thank you very much. So the data stewards, was that a full-time position or was it just one of the roles played by the person? And what kind of skills did you look for in the data steward?
Yeah, great question. The data stewards were people that were already in the organization. They just weren't called data stewards. They were people that were grappling with the data, trying to wrangle the data basically on a day-to-day basis so they could put it into spreadsheets and provide it to the analytics community. They were also the same people that were trying to work out why the data was so lousy and trying to put controls in place to improve the quality of the data. So these were people that were already in the organization. And what we did for them was we gave them a formal role, a formal job description, which they didn't have before, and we gave them training in the tools that we were providing them. Data profiling tools, for example, metadata tools that they could start using to do their job. So I'm not sure if that answers the question fully, but
yes, thanks.
Thank you, Rizwana. Drew, have you got another question?
No, what I did want to do is say thanks to Derek. It's been great to hear from him after all these years. Probably don't know, but it was his fault that I got to be a systems programmer when he abandoned me many, many years ago.
Right.
Yeah, that goes back to those early days at Höchst in Industria in Joburg. Yeah, those were good days.
Fantastic. We don't seem to have any other questions, and I can't see Di. I think she may have fallen off. Are there one last question from anybody? No more questions. Derek, thank you very much, sir. Really appreciate the time and the presentation. Would it be possible for us to share the slides with the people?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll send them over to you. And
thank you very much, Derek.
If anyone has any further questions, my email is on there, so feel free to send me emails or link up with me on LinkedIn or whatever.
Yeah, and also just to say that hopefully Derek will be coming out to South Africa. So if any of you would like to talk to him or discuss things with him whilst he's out here, please contact me or Derek or whoever, and we'll get you connected.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, you so
Derek.
much.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Take care.
Have a wonderful
Bye.
evening. Cheers. Thanks, Derek.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.
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 Goodbye.
Cheers, Bill. Derek, thank you, sir. Thanks for everything. and hopefully we see you. But if we don't, then maybe we can have another session on online.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Are you planning to be up in Joburg for it?
Yeah, I'll fly up and help out. They've asked me to, so they got me involved in the planning, and they've asked me to just host a panel session on day 2. So
yeah. Well, I hope that they're going to get the numbers. I really
we really worried.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I know that when I first started talking about the CDOIQ thing to you, we'd exchanged